Blog Talk Radio. Welcome to the Medlock Post radio show. This is where we educate, entertain, enlighten, and empower. The views and opinions on the Medlock Post radio show are those of the host and guests. They are not necessarily the views and opinions of Blog Talk Radio, Spreaker.com, its corporations, affiliates, or any other podcast streaming services. And here is your host, Richard G. Medlock.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to episode 84 of the Medlock Post. November 16th, 2022. We're on the second half of November now. Getting closer to the holidays, end of the year. Start 2023 right around the corner. So things move on and we move with it. And change happens, right? Today's episode is the 8th principle of the Constitution. But I need to clarify something that I did wrong yesterday. Yes, I did make a mistake and I will correct it. I said that Samuel Adams wrote The Wealth of Nations, and it's Adam Smith. I caught myself after the show when I was listening to it. I said, oh, mistake. And I do that. I get Samuel Smith and Samuel Adams mixed up every now and then, and yesterday was one of them. So I do apologize. Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations. Now, the quote I gave by Samuel Adams was his quote. So, anyway, today's episode, Principle of the Constitution. The American founder saw in Cicero's writings the necessary ingredients for their model society, which they eventually hoped to build. The founders obviously shared a profound appreciation of Cicero's dream because they envisioned just such a commonwealth of prosperity and justice for themselves and their posterity. Now, what were some of Cicero's fundamental principles? To Cicero, and for those quickly, Cicero was in the times of Julius Caesar. He was a good friend of Julius Caesar and helped form the government under Julius Caesar and believed in separation of powers and other things. To Cicero, the building of a society on principles of natural law was nothing more nor less than recognizing and identifying the rules of right conduct with the laws of the supreme creator of the universe. History demonstrates that even in those nations sometimes described as pagan, there were sharp, penetrating minds like Cicero's who reasoned their way through the labyrinths of natural phenomena to see beyond behind the cosmic universe, as well as the unfolding of their own lives. The brilliant intelligence of a supreme designer with an ongoing interest in both human and cosmic affairs. Cicero's compelling honesty led him to conclude that once the reality of the Creator is clearly identified in the mind, the only intelligent approach to government, justice, and human relations is in terms of the laws which the Supreme Creator has already established. The Creator's order of things is called natural law. A fundamental presupposition of natural law is that man's reasoning power is a special dispensation of the Creator and is closely akin to the rational or reasoning power of the Creator himself. In other words, man shares with his Creator this quality of utilizing a rational approach to solving problems, and the reasoning of the mind will generally lead to common sense conclusions based on what Jefferson called the laws of nature and of nature's God. That's in the Declaration of Independence. Now, men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. The founders did not believe that the basic rights of mankind originated from any social compact, king, emperor, or government authority. Those rights, they believed, came directly and exclusively from God. Therefore, they were to be maintained sacred and inviolate. John Locke said it this way, quote, the state of nature has a law of nature to govern it, which teaches all mankind who will but consult it, that being all equal and independent, no one ought to harm another in this life, health, liberty, or possessions. For men being all the workmanship of one omnipotent and infinitely wise Maker, all the servants of one sovereign Master, sent into the world by his order and about his business. They are his property, and his being God, and being furnished with like faculties, sharing all in one community of nature. There cannot be supposed any such subordination among us that may authorize us to destroy one another, unquote. Powerful words from John Locke that the founding fathers took seriously and took into their heart, along with Cicero and others. When is a right unalienable? The substantive nature of those rights which are inherent in all mankind was described by William Blackstone Terry's on the Laws of England. Quote, those rights, then, which God and nature have established, and are therefore called natural rights, such as are life and liberty, need not the aid of human laws to be more effectually invested in every man than they are. Neither do they receive any additional strength when declared by the municipal laws to be inviolable. On the contrary, no human legislature has power to abridge or destroy them, unless the owner shall himself commit some act that amounts to a forfeiture, unquote. So see, the feeling is God's law is supreme over man's law. In other words, we may do something ourselves to forfeit the unalienable rights endowed by the Creator, but no one else can take those rights from us without being subject to God's justice. This is what makes certain rights unalienable. They are inherent rights given to us by the Creator. That is why they are called natural rights. We also have certain other rights called vested rights, which are created by the community, state, or nation for our protection or well-being. However, these can be changed anytime the lawmakers feel like it. An example of a vested right would be the right to go hunting during certain seasons, or the right to travel on the public highway. Notice that the government can change both of these rights or prohibit them altogether. The region could be declared off limits for hunting. The highway could be closed. But the government could not pass a law to destroy all babies under the age of 2 or lock up everybody with blonde hair. In the one case, it would be destroying the unalienable right to life, and in the other case, it would be destroying the unalienable right to liberty. A person can lose his liberty through his own misbehavior, but not because they have blonde hair. The founders did not list all the unalienable rights. When the founders adopted the Declaration of Independence, they emphasized in parentheses, very similar to those of Blackstone, that God has endowed all mankind, quote, with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, unquote. Let's identify some of these unalienable or natural rights which the founders knew existed but did not enumerate in the Declaration of Independence. The right of self-government, the right to bear arms for self-defense, the right to own, develop, and dispose of property, the right to make personal choices, the right of free conscience, the right to choose a profession, the right to choose a mate, the right to beget one's kind, the right to assemble, the right to petition, the right to free speech, the right to free press, the right to enjoy the fruits of one's labors, the rights to improve one's position through barter or sale, the right to contrive and invent, the right to explore the natural resources of the earth, the right to privacy, the right to provide personal security, the right to provide nature's necessities, air, food, water, clothing, and shelter, the right to a fair trial, the right of free association, the right to contract. Some of those are in the Constitution. Matter of fact, most of those. Many founders use similar language emphasizing unalienable rights. It was very common among the founders, excuse me, to express their sentiments concerning man's unalienable rights in almost the same language as Jefferson. Here are the words of the Virginia Declaration of Rights adopted by the Virginia Assembly June 12, 1776. Now, this is before the Declaration of Independence. Quote, all men are by nature equally free and independent and have certain inherent rights of which, when they enter into a state of society, they cannot, by any compact, deprive or divest their posterity, namely the enjoyment of life, liberty, with the means of acquiring or possessing property and pursuing and obtaining happiness and safety, unquote. Notice that the words of the Declaration of Independence are very similar when it says, quote, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, unquote. Property rights are essential to the pursuit of happiness. Some scholars have wondered just what Jefferson meant by the pursuit of happiness. But the meaning of this phrase was well understood when it was written. Perhaps John Adams said it even more clearly. Quote, all men are born free and independent and have certain natural, essential, and unalienable rights, among which may be reckoned the right of enjoying and defending their lives and liberties, that of acquiring, possessing, and protecting property, in fine, that of seeking and obtaining their safety and happiness. There are three great natural rights. Of course, the concept of unalienable rights was by no means exclusive to the American founders. It was well understood by English defenders of the common law. Even years before the Declaration of Independence, Sir William Blackstone had written this concerning the natural rights of man. Quote, and these great natural rights may be reduced to three principal or primary articles: the right of personal security, the right of personal liberty, and the right of private property. Because as there is no other known method of compulsion or of abridging man's natural free will, but by infringement or by diminution of one or other of these important rights, the preservation of these inviolate may justly be said to include the preservation of our civil liberties in their largest and most extensive sense, unquote. Now, state constitutions. The protection of these rights was later carried over into the constitutions of the various states. Here is how the Constitution of Pennsylvania stated it in Article 1, Section 1. All men are born equally free and independent, and have certain inherent and indefeasible rights, among which are those of enjoying and defending life and liberty, of acquiring, possessing, and protecting property and reputation, and of pursuing their own happiness, unquote. Do you see the pattern here in the early years of the country? I hope so. All rights are founded on the protection of life. Yes, the protection of life, all life. Frederick Bastiat, who was trying to preserve freedom in France, wrote that man's unalienable rights are actually those which relate to life itself, and that the preservation of those rights is primarily a matter of self-preservation. He wrote, quote, we hold from God the gift which includes all others. This gift is life, physical, intellectual, and moral life. But life cannot maintain itself alone. The Creator of life has trusted us with the responsibility of preserving, developing, and perfecting it. In order that we may accomplish this, He has provided us with a collection of marvelous faculties, and He has put us in the midst of a variety of natural resources. By the application of our faculties to these natural resources, we convert them into products and use them. The process is necessary in order that life may run its appointed course. Continuing with Frederick Bastiat, life, faculties, production. In other words, individuality, liberty, property. This is man, and in spite of the cunning of artful political leaders, these free gifts from God precede all human legislation and are superior to it. Life, liberty, and property do not exist because men have made laws. On the contrary, it was the fact that life, liberty, and property existed beforehand that caused men to make laws for the protection of them in their first place. That was Frederick Bastiat, a French a fighter for freedom. Quoted him in the past on this program. But on what basis are the unalienable rights of mankind to be protected? It's an interesting question, isn't it? On what basis are the unalienable rights of mankind to be protected? Well, let's turn to a book written by William O. Nelson entitled The Charter of Liberty. And he's going to give us some good information here that we can use to help us understand how to protect mankind's unalienable rights. Charter of Liberty. The critical feature of the Constitution is not in the words, phrases, clauses, or provisions of the document itself, but rather in the vigilant and manly spirit which actuates the people of America, a spirit which nourishes freedom and in return is nourished by it. Therefore, to preserve the advantages of liberty and to maintain the spirit of the Constitution, there must be a frequent recurrence to the fundamental principles of the Constitution and a constant adherence to those of piety, justice, moderation, temperance, industry, and frugality. Now, some of those were mentioned yesterday in the seventh principle of the Constitution. Again, we're going to have to take these words and do a whole program on them. 3 immutable principles need constant affirmation if the spirit of the Constitution, not just the letter of the law, is to be kept alive and the rights of the people preserved. The first fundamental is that all people are created by God and possess a birth inherent rights pertaining to life, liberty, and property. This philosophy is rooted in the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of humanity and naturally fosters regard and respect towards one's fellows. When this belief is upheld, honesty, integrity, and respect for the property and possessions and persons of others is demonstrated in personal relationships. When this belief does not prevail, as it does not among many societies and government, the social consequences are apparent. People are seen as creatures of the government and the state as the benefactor of their rights. Ezra Taft Benson has profoundly written about the implications of this philosophy. Quote, when human law is regarded as the only source of men's rights, any leader may act capriciously toward his fellow beings. He may deny privilege such as a free expression and require even the forfeiture of life. The 20th century has witnessed monstrously evil consequences justified with euphemisms such as resettlement, pogroms, re-education, until a final solution was decreed. Likewise, consequences of agnosticism are enormous, particularly when this value is fostered by the state. How does the nation take a stand against the moral evils of totalitarianism if leaders do not recognize a source of law higher than man's? On what grounds may we morally object? The inhumanity of man toward his fellow man is the result of a forgotten relationship to God when such a value is obscured. The relationship toward one's fellow beings are also ambivalent. Unquote. A second fundamental is that all people, as creations of God, are to act and not to be acted upon. By the use of their agency, they are accountable for their actions. People should have the freedoms to determine their own fate and destiny, even if wrong. This includes the freedom to reason, speak, make economic and spiritual decisions, and provide for their own and their family's welfare without the dictates of government. This freedom unleashes their initiative, inventiveness, and creative potential. Personal and national prosperity soon follow. But when these rights are denied expression, people become spiritually enslaved, human progress is inhibited, and misery follows. A third fundamental is that religious liberty is inextricably bound to political and economic freedom. The four great freedoms, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of the press, and freedom of religion, are interrelated and cannot be treated separately. As Samuel Adams noted, they rise and fall together. The Reverend John Witherspoon, president of Princeton and signer of the Declaration of Independence, similarly stated, quote, "There is not a single instance in history in which civil liberty was lost and religious liberty preserved entire. If we yield up our temporal property, we at the same time deliver the conscience into bondage," unquote. The establishment of the American Republic, based on a written constitution, created a unique philosophy that has permeated the free world. It has given the world an example of prosperity never before witnessed in its history. It has kindled a desire on the part of millions of immigrants to come to this country for opportunity and freedom. It has provided an example of the sanctity of human rights, property ownership, and respect of law, justice, and freedom. That is why the United States is emulated by all who love liberty. And that is why it is the charter of liberty for all people. We will stand by its principles. We, the people, will stand by its principles. Our freedom depends not so much on what we know about the Constitution, but on whether we understand its fundamental principles and then live righteous, virtuous lives. When we do that, we will influence others by proclaiming liberty and equal rights to all men and extending the hand of fellowship to the oppressed of all nations. John Taylor wrote on the principles that have secured our rights, quote, "If lawmakers and administrators can afford to trample upon justice, equity, and the Constitution of this country, they will find thousands and tens of thousands who are willing to follow in their wake in the demolition of the rights of man and the destruction of all principles of justice and the safeguards of the nation. But we will stand by and maintain its principles and the rights of all men of every color and every clime to the truth. Live our religion and keep the commandments of God, and God will bless us in time and throughout the eternities that are to come," unquote. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the eighth principle of the Constitution. What is our unalienable rights? I hope that gave you a better understanding of what we were given, what we have at our disposal, and what our founders understood. Yes, they understood that. That's why we have this Constitution. And it is still viable and important today. All right, let's take a quick break and listen to My Country 'Tis of Thee. Yes, my country 'tis of thee. And program note, ladies and gentlemen, Friday I will be doing a special Thanksgiving program, Thanksgiving and gratitude. And because I'll be traveling all next week, the family, we will be gone, and then we will begin fresh on November 28th, that Monday, and finish out November and move into December in the holiday season. And I think we're going to do some special stuff over the holiday season. We also already have it set up on December 15th, which is a Thursday. We will have Joni Bryan of the 917 Society here. That's the anniversary of the adoption of the Bill of Rights. And we will talk about the Bill of Rights that day. If you're not familiar with Joni and the 917 Society, they are in all 50 states putting pocket constitutions in the hands of 8th graders and 11th graders. And it's having tremendous response. So she'll be back with us on December 15th. And we're planning some other things. We don't have a date yet, but we're some special things coming up. Now, I want to go back. I didn't get to this yesterday. It was on November 14th, 1754, on this day in history. Now, also yesterday was November 15th. On this day in 1777, the Articles of Confederation were adopted by the colonists. And we all know that it was not strong enough to really pull the colonists together, the states together, and move forward like the Constitution did. And that's why there was a constitutional convention in 1787. That is totally different than a convention of states, folks. They're not one and the same. On this day, you're going to say, who are these people? Mercy Otis and James Warren were married. On November 14, 1754, Mercy Otis and James Warren are married. Both of them were direct descendants of pilgrims who arrived on the Mayflower, which I'm a descendant from William Bradford on the Mayflower. Mercy Otis Warren became one of the first female authors in the United States. She was an advisor on politics and a correspondent with such people as John Hancock, Patrick Henry, George Washington, and John Adams. Mercy's 3-volume History of the Rise, Progress, and Termination of the American Revolution became one of the first published works about the American Revolution and also one of the first works published by a woman in America. James Warren was highly involved in politics before and during the American Revolution as well. He was a member of the Sons of Liberty and was one of the first presidents of the Massachusetts Provincial Assembly, the independent government formed by the citizens of Massachusetts after Great Britain dissolved its assembly. James Warren fought at the Battle of Bunker Hill and was a paymaster general of the Continental Army for a time. Mary Otis Warren and James Warren were central figures during the Revolutionary War era, knowing many of the key leaders personally, even though their names are not so familiar to people today. James and Mercy also hosted meetings of Massachusetts patriots in their homes. They formed the Massachusetts Common Committee of Correspondence, which was responsible for coordinating the information, tactics, and plans of the patriots, along with Samuel Adams and others in their own living room. Mercy's brother, James Otis, is often called the father of the American Revolution for his fiery patriotic rhetoric. Mercy published liberty and anti-British themed poems and plays during the years leading up to and including the American Revolution, but never under her own name, which would have been highly unusual for a woman at that time. Instead, she used pen names. Her understanding and insight into politics was unusual for a woman in that day as well, since politics was considered to be the realm of men only. In 1790, she published her first book using her own name, Poems, Dramatic, and Miscellaneous. In 1788, Mercy published Observations on the New Constitution under the pen name A Columbian Patriot. This work was critical of the new Constitution. Both she and her husband were anti-federalist and did not trust centralized power in the new government. Mercy's final work, History of the Rise, Progress, and Termination of the American Revolution, caused a breach in her relationship with one of her most important mentors, John Adams, because the work portrayed him in a bad light. Adams and Warren had exchanged letters frequently, and he often critiqued her early works at her request. Later, he seemed to move away from the idea that there was nothing wrong with a woman sharing her political views publicly in favor of the more socially acceptable view that politics was a subject properly discussed by men only and not by women, and this offended Mercy. Their friendship and political partnership was almost lost, but was restored in 1812 through the intervention of mutual friends and shortly before her death in 1814. Interesting story about our founding fathers, interesting players that we've never really heard about. And that's how we learn, folks. We go find these things. Look up Mercy Otis Warren and her husband. Just lost my train of thought. I got to go back here. James Warren. Mercy Otis and James Warren. Key players in the Revolutionary War and thereafter. Now, don't think she's the only one, her and her husband, that were anti-federalists. There were a lot of people. That's why the Federalist Papers were written by James Madison and Alexander Hamilton. And again, that's good study. Not reading, it's good study. Now, let's finish out today this. The headline reads, Wrong Again. 50 years of failed eco-apocalyptic predictions. Yes, these climate change eco-apocalyptic predictions. Modern doomsayers have been predicting climate and environmental disaster since the 1960s. They continue to do so today. Yes. None, zip, zero, nada, of the apocalyptic predictions with due dates as of today have come true. Here is a collection of notably wild predictions from notably people in government and science. Now, we're not going to go, there's like almost 50 of them, more than that by now, because of predictions that have been made in the last few months. But more than merely spotlighting the failed predictions, this collection shows that the makers of failed apocalyptic predictions often are individuals holding respected positions in government and science, except for Al Gore. While such predictions have been and continue to be enthusiastically reported by the media eager for sensational headlines, the failures are typically not revisited. I wonder why. Okay, 1967. Folks, I remember every one of these. I've lived through all of this. Dire famine by 1975. Did not happen anywhere in the world. 1969. Everyone will disappear in a cloud of blue steam by 1989. Not just some people. Everyone will disappear in a cloud of blue steam by 1989. Now, by 1969, when this was made, there were a lot of people caught up in a lot of steam and smoke from drugs and LSD and other things. I'm just throwing that in, folks. 1970, Ice Age by 2000, meaning most of the Earth will be covered by ice. Did not happen. 1970, America subject to water rationing by 1974 and food rationing by 1980. The only rationing we had by 1974 was gas rationing because of our policies, our energy policies, and Saudi Arabia cut America off. 1971, new ice age coming. We're still waiting. 1972, new ice age by 2070. So I guess at this time they're saying, well, we'll make the prediction because we'll all be dead by then, and we can't be embarrassed if nothing happens in 2070. 1974, new ice age coming fast. 1974, another ice age. Well, how many ice ages are we going to have here? Well, we've had none. 1974, ozone depletion, a great peril to life. Folks, this was such a big crock, this ozone hole in the atmosphere. We got to change chemicals. You can't use antiperspirant spray on your underarms and all this stuff. 1976. This one was just called the cooling. It's going to cool down. They didn't predict an ice age, just it's going to cool down. 1980. Acid rain kills life in lakes. But 10 years later, the U.S. government program formed to study acid rain concluded nothing happened. Acid rain was a hoax. 1978. I don't know how I got those dates mixed up, but 1978. No end in sight to 30-year cooling trend. Whoops. But according to NASA satellite data, there is a slight warming trend since 1979. That's right. And you know how much of that warming trend it is? It's less than 1 degree of increase. 1988. James Hansen forecast increased regional drought in the 1990s. The last really dry year in the Midwest was 1988, and in recent years have been record wet. 1988. Washington, D.C.'s days over 90 degrees Fahrenheit to from 35 to 85. But the number of hot days in the D.C. area peaked in 1911 and have been declining ever since, although there is a lot of hot air in Washington, D.C. 1988. The Maldives will be completely underwater in 30 years. Well, 30 years is 2018, and the Maldives are still there, living and above water. You see, folks, you just come here to be educated and empowered. This is what we're doing. 1989. Rising seas to obliterate nations by 2000. Obliterate. That means we're going to be underwater. Hasn't happened. 1989. New York City's West Side Highway underwater by 2019. New York City's West Side Highway underwater by 2019. Well, all you people in New York City's West Side, I hope you figured out a new traffic. Oh, no, wait a minute. It's not underwater, is it? 1995 to present, climate model failure. Hasn't happened. 2000, children won't know what snow is. Now they're going into this warming trend. This is from Al Gore and his buddies. 2000, children won't know what snow is. Well, yeah, if you live in warm climates where it never snows. 2002, famine in 10 years. Now, this is world famine. Well, that was 20 years ago. Didn't happen. 2004, Britain to have Siberian climate by 2020. Well, folks, Britain over the last 2 years has had a warm climate, not a Siberian. 2008, Arctic will be ice-free by 2018. And then in 2008, Al Gore warns of ice-free Arctic by 2013. Folks, clocks were put on these, countdown clocks. The Arctic and Antarctic both have grown, their ice areas have grown in the last 20 years, not shrunk. 2009, Prince Charles, now King Charles III, says only 8 years to save the planet. Well, let's see, 2009 plus 8 is 2017. So either we've all died and gone to heaven, and heaven was just like what it was on earth, or nothing happened. 2009. United Kingdom Prime Minister Gordon Brown says 50 days to save the planet from catastrophe. This is in 2009, along with he and, I guess he wanted to show up Prince Charles and make it 50 days instead of 8 years. You see this, folks? Prediction after prediction after prediction. 2009, Arctic ice-free by 2014. Didn't happen. Still hasn't happened. 2013, Arctic ice-free by 2015. 2013, U.S. Navy, Arctic ice-free by 2016. 2014, French Foreign Minister, only 500 days before climate chaos. Predictions since then that have not come true, that probably won't come true, and it's all about doing away with capitalism. I was watching a gentleman on Larry Kudlow last night. The only section of Larry Kudlow I watched or was able to watch last night. And I'm trying to think of his name. I can't. And he's from an organization that is against all this climate. Well, I say he's trying to warn people about what they were talking about 27, which is a joke. That's all the eco-wacko environmentalists get together. It's like a G20. All these nations get together. You know, Biden was there and all this stuff. And they make promises, and that's all it is. But he's talking about what they've done, trillions of dollars over the years, and nothing has changed. They just feel like if they pump money into it, it makes them look good, make them feel good, and they can go about doing whatever they want to do. But see the trend I brought up a couple of weeks ago, John Kerry wants to pay third world countries not to use fossil fuels. Well, that's the COP27 thing. They adopted it, and some of it's been going on anyway. So they want to pay the poor third world countries not to use fossil fuels, but they want to go into these third world countries, these major industrial countries, and build plants for cheap labor using fossil fuels. So some of these third world leaders are waking up to the fact, hey, they're not paying us enough money, and they want us to go backwards in our civilization. And that, folks, is the Medlock Post radio show for today. I'm glad you were here. I hope that you are learning things from the messages that we are putting out, and hope that we are making a difference in some way. I really do. And a little purple haze to go into the COP27 so they can say, oh, there's a haze. Look at that. It's purple. We're doomed. I don't know. I don't know what they're thinking. They're just secularists that want to play God. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, may God bless America. Goodbye, and have a great day.